Hey y'all, Mooch here. Yeah, finally doing a video. This is hopefully the first of many. I have, I don't know, 70, 80 different topics written down, but you're going to be the primary determinant of what I actually talk about. Let me know down in the comments. Ask your questions. I won't answer them in the comments, but they'll be part of the next video. Tell me the things you'd like to hear about: safety, performance, chemistry, battery comparisons, shootouts, and things like that. And whether they be more technical, less technical. I'll get the hang of what the community is looking for, but you can certainly help out with a lot of that now. Some of you may be asking, what the heck is Mooch? That's my persona, Mooch, Battery Mooch, on Electronic Cigarette Forum, Electronic Cigarette subreddit, Facebook, Instagram. For the past 2.5 years, I've tested over 200 different batteries for the vaping community, electronic cigarette community, sorting out the ones with the exaggerated ratings, the ones that perform better, perform worse, helping vapers learn about safety, and choosing the best battery for the way they vape. I'll be expanding some of what I do online to here, because some things just work better on video. Please forgive the lower resolution video and this little $20 lavalier mic. It's all I have right now. If the videos start working out, people watching, I'm happy to upgrade, because I know a lot of the reviewers out there and the other YouTube personalities have some incredibly high resolution, gorgeous lighting, etc. I have just what I've pieced together here, and I ask for your patience just as I get things set up and hopefully become much better at this. I want to talk about first something I think a lot of us don't mention to new vapors when we talk to them, because we don't like thinking about it. We don't want to deal with it. It pisses us off. And that's the fact that these batteries have some hazards associated with them. These external batteries, loose batteries, 18650s, 26650s, some of the newer sizes. They use a flammable electrolyte that's toxic. There's a tremendous amount of energy, power inside these batteries. These are not the batteries that are like AA's sitting in the remote. These are much more powerful. And there's serious risk of bodily injury, or property damage if they're misused or mishandled. And I want to emphasize that. If misused or mishandled, we can reduce the risk significantly by just treating them properly. Which leads me into 4 inconvenient truths that we really hate talking about, but I think every vapor should know, and we should make an effort that every new vapor who comes in knows these truths, not to scare them off, not a fear-mongering type of activity, and not as a conspiracy to drive people towards internal battery mods, which aren't completely safe on their own. There are things that can happen with those, but as a way of having them be able to make an educated decision as how they want to vape. If they decide they want to use an internal battery mod to start, well, that's great. They can go do that as they learn more about these external batteries that we're going to talk about. Inconvenient truth number 1. These batteries, 18650s, 26650s, 26650s, and others. I have a lot of respect for the reviewers who do this in one take, just for an hour. It's very hard to do. None of those batteries are made for use outside a protected battery pack with protection electronics in them. Everything about them is designed to be handled once, put in that pack, and that's it. Using them outside the pack, we have to accept that we are taking risks. So the risk of the hazards inside those batteries causing a problem go up. So we have to be able to say, yes, okay, we're going to take that risk because the benefits are worth it to us, the way we want to vape, the mods we want to use. But they're not meant for that purpose. Inconvenient truth number 2. The battery rewrappers, the ones who put ratings on the wraps, buy batteries from any number of different manufacturers, put wraps on them, often very highly exaggerate the ratings, the capacity and the current ratings. This is not good, and this is a huge problem for us, and it just can't be regulated away. They'll deal with overall safety, but not with the ratings that are put on the batteries. There may be some they can do, but it's really up to us now to educate each other about this. These videos are, large part of these videos are going to be about this, but every new vapor should know that 40, 50, 60 amps on a battery cannot exist. They may call it a pulse rating or a max rating or something like that, but as you'll see as we talk about it more, that's useless. because you can't compare one battery's pulse rating to another. Inconvenient truth number 3. Even if we buy batteries manufactured directly in the original plastic wrap from one of the big 4 companies, it can be a lower grade battery. It could be a B grade, probably not lower than that, but a lot of these batteries are bought and sold on a secondary market. We don't know where they're sourced from, how old they are, or anything like that. So we still have to be careful, even if buying something, LG HG2 battery, a fantastic 20 amp, 3000 milliampere hour mAh battery, we still have to be careful because it could be a lower grade, slightly lower performance, nothing huge. It doesn't turn into a time bomb or hand grenade just because they're lower grade, but we're paying more for less. So buying from a trusted, known vendor for genuine batteries who carries good grades for these batteries is going to be a very important part of what we do as vapers. Inconvenient truth number 4. Even if we try to do all that, batteries from the big 4, because they're popular, get counterfeited. There are fakes all over the place, and some of them are getting very, very good. Very good. Now, I'm several times every day asked to authenticate batteries by people who are worried, and I just can't. I can't do that from photos. It's sometimes hard to do even if you have them. A lot of LG batteries look very close. Now, if you put them through tests and you can say, okay, yeah, that's a fake, not a fake. Do some confidential authenticity testing for some vendors. But as vapers, again, it's back to buying from the known, reliable vendors, the trusted vendors, in order to not get these fakes, vendors who are testing their batteries, who get them from reliable wholesalers and distributors. So that's important for us also. So these 4 truths, we hate them, they piss us off, but it's something all new vapers should know and understand and be able to go, okay, yeah, I'm going to be careful, I can deal with that, I'm not going to misuse or mishandle these things, and I'm going to try to get the best ones that I can find and not try to save 25 cents in the battery and take a chance with it being a fake or who knows what. Okay, on to ratings, the main topic for tonight. I'm going to kind of go quickly through it. Let me know what you may want me to come back to, go into further detail, explain a little bit further down in the comments. But I did want to cover a lot of differences because when the manufacturer says a rating is, what the rewrappers say ratings are, and what I say a rating is, can be very, very different. Let's go to the whiteboard. Start with the big 4. Samsung, Sony, LG, Panasonic, Sanyo. Typically, the ratings you're going to see are going to be capacity, which is milliampere hours or mAh, M-A-H, indication of how long the battery runs, how many milliamps for how many hours, 2500 milliampere hours, 2500 milliamps for 1 hour. If you do it at a low level, that doesn't hold up at 20 amps or 30 amps or something, but it's a way to help us determine how much capacity, how much runtime there is for the battery. Now, the manufacturers have multiple ratings. They have minimum or guaranteed rating, and that's usually the same. That'll be the lowest number. For like the LG HG2, minimum might be 3000 mAh. But then you have something called the typical and nominal capacity ratings. That might be 3100. I forgot if that one or the VTC6. It's 3100 or 3120. It's always a little bit higher. These typical and nominal will be the same. Minimum and guaranteed will be the same. But typical and nominal, which is usually what you'll find when you actually use a battery, it's not the guaranteed minimum, they'll be a little bit higher. The next one, the one that causes so many problems, CDR, continuous discharge rating. They may call it continuous current rating, some variation of that. This is not a safety, it's going to blow up point. It's a statement about cycle life. Safety is built into it. And performance is also built into it. Essentially, it's saying, look, you can run it at this level, let's say 20 amps for a Samsung 25R. You can run it at 20 amps every cycle down to 2.5 volts for X number of cycles before you lose this much performance. It's usually a loss in capacity or an increase in what's called internal resistance, indicator how much sag the battery will have. And built into that, with the number they set, is an understanding that you're not going too high in temperature when you do that to be dangerous, etc. So it's not directly, hey, this is your safety limit. It's saying, hey, this is what the number we never want you to exceed to get good life out of this battery. Now that goes for pulse also. If you start pulsing a battery up above this CDR, then you're also damaging the battery internally. You're accelerating its aging. Not as badly as running it continuously, but it's still there. And that's why the manufacturer recommends never going over the CDR. Pulse ratings, no. Manufacturers don't have pulse ratings. There are none. If you see a number where they use the word pulse as a spec, that is a one-time capability type listing, or the numbers used to size the protection electronics for the battery pack. They are not pulse ratings for the battery. None of the big four issue pulse ratings for their batteries. Samsung 25R has its 100 amp for 1 second. Yeah, but if it was a rating, they would tell you how often you could do it, the time between the pulses, etc. They don't. That's an emergency, one-time only kind of thing that they issue to say, look, it can do this, but that's how you size your protection electronics for it. It'll survive it. It won't like it. It'll never be the same, that battery. Next one, let's talk about BMS. Those are the numbers where you'll see like the Sony VTC. A lot of people cut out from the data sheet when they say, 80 amps for half a second, 60 amps for 3 seconds. Right there in the data sheet, it says, this is for the protection electronics. Those are not pulse ratings for the batteries. Those of you who haven't seen the tables, don't worry about it then. You'll also see 3.6 or 3.7 volts, what they call the nominal voltage, and that causes a lot of confusion in the community. That's a way to identify the chemistry of the battery. Alkaline batteries at 1.5 volts, nickel metal hydrides at 1.2, lithium-ion at 3.6, 3.7. It's not the charging voltage, it's just the nominal voltage. If you're discharging it at a very low discharge rate, half an amp, quarter amp or something, it'll spend most of its time around those voltages. You'll see the discharge come down, go pretty steady, and then when it's empty, it'll plunge. Now that shape of that curve, if you're plotting it voltage versus running time, that'll change, and we'll go over some of this depending on how hard you run the battery. But if you run it slowly, it spends most of its time around those. We don't need to know it. It doesn't matter. As long as you know you're using a rechargeable lithium-ion battery, you charge it to 4.2 volts and you're fine. Now, when we start getting into trouble is what the wrappers or re-wrappers do. Any company that takes one of these batteries, or maybe a China manufactured battery, and puts their own wrapper on it. All bets are off then as to what the heck's going on. When they put down the capacity, they'll use typical capacity. They'll never use the lower number because that doesn't sell batteries, the minimum guarantee. They're going to use these higher numbers. Often they'll tack on 100 or 200 milliampere hours, mAh, more, because more equals better. They sell more batteries the higher the numbers are. So they'll add a couple hundred. They'll often use this CDR, but double it. A 20 amp battery will be called 40 amp. They might decide, they may call it the CDR or a continuous or a max continuous or something. A lot of times they'll just put one number on the wrapper, and we don't know if that is a pulse rating of some kind or max, whatever that means for them, or if they're actually saying it can be run continuously at that, which no, it can't. Not at 40 amp, 50, 60 amps for an 18650, no. This is where the exaggerated numbers really, really come in. And these two numbers can change at any time, along with what cell they wrap. They'll have this, I don't know, it'll be a black and red wrap, and they'll just keep using a black and red wrap, and whatever happens to be available, they'll put it in there. This is one of the inconvenient truths of vaping with these loose batteries and using batteries from the re-wrappers. They can change at any time. There's nothing we can do other than be careful. If you're ever unsure, try to find other people with them, try to find photos online. You can go to my tests. I take pictures of all the batteries I test and see if anything has changed. Certainly let me know if you know something's changed. Any pulse or max rating is completely useless. Why? You say? Because you're thinking, I know a lot of us think, hey, we pulse a battery, quote unquote, when we vape. It's not continuous. To the battery, actually, it is continuous. It's just 2 seconds long instead of 5 minutes long. It's continuous or pulse, whatever you want to call it. But nothing different happens in a battery after a few milliseconds. But these are useless because every company out there, if they don't just set it in a marketing meeting, which more than one company has admitted to me, they just make it up to be competitive on the market. Unless you know the length of the pulse, the time between pulses, and the criteria used to set the rating, temperature, running time, anything else, you can't compare one battery's pulse rating with another. And if you can't compare the numbers, each of the numbers is useless. So these pulse and uses the max, and the 3.6 and 3.7 means nothing. It's just on the nominal voltage. Something I also didn't put here is a lot of the rewrap batteries say IMR on it, which is a reference, it's a manufacturer's model number prefix to typically used for one of the safer chemistries. But none of the batteries that these rewrappers are using use that chemistry. So the IMR has just become sort of a generic term for a non-LiPo battery. It has nothing to do with the chemistry often associated with that IMR prefix. We'll get into chemistry more when we talk in another video. The last, what do I do for my ratings, for my test reports and stuff? And there's been some big changes on that. First one, capacity. I use the minimum or guaranteed minimum or rated capacity of it whenever I can. It's hard sometimes to find that. Sometimes I'll use it from testing. Other times I'm forced to use the nominal, but I'll always try to use the rated because that's the guaranteed minimum. You hopefully will get something above that. The CDR will either be from the manufacturer, if it's one of the big four, or it'll be what I estimate it to be from one of the wrappers. If it's a China manufactured cell, then all I can do is estimate. If it is a lower grade big four battery rewrap, I can just estimate what the new one is. Now what's very important here is, this CDR and even this one here, not exceeding it doesn't mean the battery's safe. There is no safe use of a battery. We spoke earlier. Think about your car. No matter how many precautions you take, the hazards of using a car are still there. All you can do is minimize the risk or the likelihood of those hazards causing any harm. Same thing with the battery. There is no safe. We can just do everything we can, not misuse them, not mishandle them, to minimize the risk of using that battery and make them safer than they were before. So just thinking, just because you run under the CDR, run a 20 amp battery at 5 amps, that doesn't mean it's safe. Because you can still have a mod fail, you can still have battery wrap damage or a missing insulator when you rewrapped it, or any other disaster scenarios that might come up. And I think this is important when we're talking about. I get asked so often, every day, is this build safe? Is this resistance safe? Is this power level safe? And you have to say no. But staying under the CDR, running a 20 amp battery at 5 amps is much safer than running it at 50 amps, at 40, 30 amps. So it's just safer, and it's something just in the back of the mind. Again, not to be at fear, but just to respect these batteries. Something I did recently, MVA limit is gone. That was an indicator of where you should never go past, where things really start to get hairy with a particular battery. It got turned into, by many in the community, a point to start off at, a point to recommend to others where they can start vaping. When someone says, hey, how low can I run a Samsung 25R? And someone would give the MVA limit. No. We should never, ever do that. This was a point to stay away from, particularly for a new vapor. If you've got a 25 amp battery, VTC5A, you can run a 0.17 resistance on that. You can run it, 75 watts. That's plenty to start a new vapor out when they ask, how hard can I go? With a 30 amp battery, it's a 0.12 build, 0.12 ohm build, or 90 watts. Again, these are plenty to recommend to a new vapor, and that's what I ask everyone to do. Let's just stay below the continuous ratings when we recommend something to a new vapor, and let them find their own path. Let them decide then how they want to vape. Once they start vaping and see what it's like at 0.17 on a VTC5A or 0.12 with the 30 amp 2700 batteries. What I'm doing to replace the MVA limit and my pulse discharge graphs, which took way too long to generate, confused a lot of people, and made it very hard to compare different batteries, is I am creating 2 or 3, but at least 2, different performance specifications now for the batteries I test. These will be used to directly, easily, on a table, compare which one hits hardest and which one's going to run longest. Even if they're both 20 amp, 2500 mAh batteries, with these 2 numbers, certainly, maybe the third one, you'll be able to pick the one that hits harder and or runs longer. The first one is internal resistance, the DC, direct current, internal resistance. You'll often see the AC, internal resistance, in a data sheet. That's measured a little differently. The one for us, since we start off and then we pulse it down hard and come back up, DC, internal resistance, those two changes as opposed to AC, a little sine wave for the AC testing. DC internal resistance is what we need. That's what I measure. That will directly tell you, if you multiply it by the current, what the voltage sag will be. We'll go into a lot more detail on this, but that's a great way to essentially sort out the hardest hitter. Lower the resistance, the harder the battery hits. The next spec, voltage of the first pulse. I don't know if I'm going to have this because all you need to do is multiply your current by the internal resistance and you get the voltage of the first pulse if you subtract the voltage drop from 4.2 volts or wherever you started from. So I don't know if I'm going to have this. Last one is watt hours, and that one may take a whole video on itself, but this is the way we always should have been picking batteries. We use ampere hours now, the capacity, to tell you how long it runs, but you can't tell at what voltage it's running at. Does it drop down very low and sit here, or does it hit really hard and stay high and then only dive down at the end? We can't tell from the capacity rating because it's just current times milliamps times hours. But watts is voltage times current, watts times hours. So it also includes how hard that battery is going to hit. And one thing we can do very quickly is just go over a little bit about what this is. And I'm not going to make people's heads spin here or make your eyes roll back in your head here on what this is. But just to give you a little idea of the usefulness of this, if we take two different batteries, one of them comes down in voltage, comes across, and dives down. And this is time. Pardon my handwriting, this is voltage. And we've got another battery that comes down and does this. Time. Both are 20 amp, 2500 mAh. If all we had was this, we would have no idea that there would be such a big difference in performance for these two batteries. What watt hours is, it tells us, and if we say, hey, here's the starting time, watt hours measures that, how much room there is underneath here. And the higher the number, especially if everything else is the same, the current and the capacity, the higher the number, that means the bigger this area is, which means it ran at a higher voltage, which means it hit harder. So watt hours is a fantastic way to figure out performance of a battery, especially if your other things are already identical. If not, if some of these are different, and maybe these are the same, then you can start to figure out some other things. We'll go over it in a video, but essentially it's the area under the curve for the discharge. And it can be really, really handy for determining performance. And that's most of ratings. I'm dancing over a lot of things. There's 15, 20 topics we can talk about just in terms of ratings, but I wanted to touch on a lot of those, the changes I made and other things there, hoping that you can let me know what's working for you in terms of what you want to hear or not hear, and we'll take it from there. I think the thing I'd love to see happen this year, it's a new year, a lot of vapers are just starting out, they have new mods, they don't know where to go is. For us as a community to start with the continuous current ratings or lower, just to recommend to other vapers. We're each free to choose how we want to vape, but a 0.17 ohm on a mech with a 25 amp battery, a 0.12 ohm build on a mech with a 30 amp battery, that's a great start for them. And just start them there and let them determine where they want to go from there. For anybody who's made the decision to use these batteries, keep them in perfect condition. Keep the wraps in perfect condition, the little ring insulator up at the top. We'll go into more details about this later. And I think this is also a good chance for us to, as a community, to just take a look. Just a little bit is, how are we vaping? Do we just like the look of a big heavy coil? We throw that in and then we try to find some way to power it, with massive ramp up and ramp down because we want to use a single battery mech? Or can we vape just a little more efficiently? Can we match the coil better to the battery, to the mod? A good performing 30 amp battery at 30 amps wastes 18 watts of power inside the battery. That's even before you get to the losses going through the mod and etc. So I think there are opportunities here that, you know, if we've got a 0.12 build and a 30 amp battery, maybe with a different build, it's a different wire, a little different, some changes, maybe we can get the effects of the resistances people vape at lower than 0.12, but still be able to use 25 and 30 amp batteries. Just an idea that I wanted to throw out. But we'll cover that a lot more in future videos. Picking batteries for best performance, how to use the new performance specifications and things like that, in addition to a lot of other topics, and whatever you'd like to see covering, questions you might have. Thanks for watching.